I was standing at the altar in my $5,000 wedding dress when my fiancé literally stopped the ceremony to run after his ex. But what I did for revenge, I married his biggest enemy, destroyed his business, and now he's begging me to take him back. This is my story. Before I spill this tea about the most dramatic day of my life, smash that like button if you're ready for some real talk about betrayal and the sweetest revenge ever. Subscribe, because I got more stories where this came from. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now get comfortable, because this story is absolutely insane. Y'all, let me start from the beginning, because this story is so wild, you're gonna think I made it up. But honey, I lived through every painful, embarrassing, and eventually victorious moment of it. My name is Candace, and 3 years ago, I thought I had my whole life figured out. I was 32, running my own successful marketing firm in Atlanta, had my own house, my own car, my own everything. I was that woman who didn't need a man but wanted one. You know what I'm saying? I was complete on my own, but I was ready to share my life with someone special. That someone was supposed to be Antonio. Lord, just saying his name still makes me shake my head. I met this man at a business networking event, and honey, he was fine with a capital F, 6'2", chocolate skin, perfect smile, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than some people's rent. He was a corporate lawyer at one of the biggest firms in the city, and when he walked up to me with that confident swagger, I thought I was looking at my future husband. And for 3 years, everything was perfect. I'm talking fairy tale perfect. This man treated me like I was the only woman on earth. Fresh flowers every Friday, surprise weekend trips, little notes in my purse when I wasn't looking. He met my mama and had Sunday dinner with my family every week. My daddy, who never liked any man I brought home, actually approved of Antonio. That should have been my first clue that something was off, because my daddy has never been wrong about a man in his life. Antonio proposed to me on my 35th birthday in the most romantic way possible. He rented out the entire rooftop of the hotel where we had our first date, had a violinist playing our song, and got down on one knee with a ring that was so beautiful it made me cry before he even said the words. When he asked me to marry him, I didn't even hesitate. I said yes so fast, I probably gave myself whiplash. We spent the next 6 months planning what I thought was going to be the wedding of my dreams. I'm talking about a $50,000 budget, 300 guests, a dress that made me look like a black princess, and a venue that looked like something out of a magazine. Every detail was perfect because I'm a perfectionist, and this was supposed to be the most important day of my life. But see, there were little signs that something wasn't right. Signs that I ignored because I was so caught up in the excitement of planning a wedding and starting my new life. Like how Antonio would get weird phone calls that he'd take in another room, or how he'd sometimes zone out when we were together, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. There was also this one time when we were at dinner and he accidentally called me by another woman's name. When I asked him about it, he laughed it off and said it was just a coworker's name that he'd been saying all day. The name was Brittany. I should have paid attention to that, but I didn't. I was too busy being in love and planning my perfect wedding to see what was right in front of my face. The morning of my wedding day, I woke up feeling like the luckiest woman alive. My girls were at my house early, helping me get ready, doing my makeup, fixing my hair, making sure everything was perfect. My mama was crying happy tears, telling me how proud she was and how beautiful I looked. I put on that dress, and when I looked in the mirror, I felt like a queen. I was glowing, y'all, literally glowing with happiness and love. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock at this beautiful venue with gardens and a fountain. When I arrived in the limo with my daddy, I could see all our guests already seated, everyone dressed up and smiling. The weather was perfect, the flowers were gorgeous, and everything looked exactly like I had imagined it would. My daddy walked me down that aisle, and I felt like I was floating. The music was playing. Everyone was standing and looking at me with such love and joy, and there was Antonio at the altar, looking handsome as ever in his black tuxedo. For a moment, everything felt right with the world. The ceremony started beautifully. Our pastor was saying all the right words about love and commitment and building a life together. We exchanged our personal vows, and I cried when Antonio told me I was his everything and that he couldn't wait to spend the rest of his life with me. We were just about to get to the I do part when it happened. The back doors of the venue opened, and this woman walked in. Not walked, y'all. Glided. Like she owned the place. She was tall, slim, with long blonde hair and wearing a tight white dress. White. To someone else's wedding. The audacity. But what really made my blood run cold was the look on Antonio's face when he saw her. His eyes went wide, his mouth dropped open, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. The woman, and I already knew this had to be Brittany, smiled at him and gave him a little wave, like she was saying hello to an old friend. Antonio looked at me, then looked at her, then looked back at me, and in that moment, I saw my future husband make a choice that would change both of our lives forever. He stepped away from me, right there at the altar, in front of 300 people, including both our families. He stepped away from me and started walking toward her. "Antonio," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. "What are you doing?" He turned back to me, and the look in his eyes was something I'll never forget. It was like he was seeing me for the first time, or maybe like he was seeing me clearly for the first time, and realizing I wasn't who he wanted to see. "I'm sorry, Candace," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I can't do this. I thought I could, but I can't. She's the one I never got over." Y'all, I stood there in my $5,000 wedding dress, holding my bouquet, with 300 people staring at me, and watched my fiancé walk away from our wedding ceremony to go to another woman. The humiliation was so deep, I felt like I was drowning in it. Brittany smiled at me like she'd just won some kind of prize, took Antonio's hand, and they walked out of my wedding together, just like that. 3 years, 6 months of planning, $50,000, and my whole heart. And he threw it all away for a woman who had the nerve to show up at our wedding in a white dress. The silence in that venue was deafening. Then my mama started crying. My daddy looked like he wanted to kill somebody, and my maid of honor rushed over to hold me up because my knees were about to give out. But you know what? After the initial shock wore off, I wasn't sad. I was mad. I was so mad that I could have burned that whole venue down with my rage. How dare he? How dare he humiliate me like that, in front of everyone we knew and loved? How dare he waste 3 years of my life? How dare he make me believe I wasn't enough? The weeks after the wedding were rough. I had to cancel the honeymoon, return all the gifts, and deal with everyone asking me if I was okay. But the worst part was that Antonio didn't even have the decency to apologize properly. He sent me a text message, saying he was sorry for hurting me, but he had to follow his heart. Follow his heart. Like what we had for 3 years wasn't real. Like I was just some placeholder until his real love came back. I was angry, but I wasn't broken. See, that's the thing about being a strong Black woman. We know how to turn pain into power. And honey, I was about to become very, very powerful. About 2 months after my wedding disaster, I was at another networking event, trying to get back into my normal routine and focus on my business. That's when I met Julian. Julian was everything Antonio wasn't. Where Antonio was flashy, Julian was understated. Where Antonio was all talk, Julian was all action. And most importantly, Julian was Antonio's biggest business rival. See, both men worked in corporate law, but they specialized in different areas and had been competing for the same clients for years. Antonio had told me all about this Julian character, how he was always trying to steal clients, and how much he couldn't stand the man. Antonio described Julian as ruthless, cutthroat, and someone who would do anything to win. What Antonio failed to mention was that Julian was also fine as wine, brilliant, and had more integrity in his little finger than Antonio had in his whole body. Julian and I started talking at that networking event, and I found out he knew exactly who I was. He'd heard about what happened at my wedding. Everyone in Atlanta's professional circle had heard about it. And he told me he thought Antonio was the biggest fool who ever lived. Any man who would leave a woman like you at the altar, he said, doesn't deserve to call himself a man at all. We exchanged numbers, and Julian asked me out to dinner. Not to get back at Antonio, not for business, but because he said he'd been wanting to meet me for years and never had a good reason to approach me while I was with someone else. Our first date lasted 6 hours. We talked about everything: business, life, dreams, goals. Julian was a gentleman in every sense of the word, but he was also ambitious and driven in a way that made me respect him immediately. He'd built his law practice from nothing, worked his way through law school, and was supporting his elderly mother and younger sister. He was a man with substance, something I realized Antonio never really had. Within 3 months, Julian and I were official. And honey, let me tell you, this man knew how to treat a woman. Where Antonio had been all flash and no substance, Julian was consistent, reliable, and genuine. He didn't just bring me flowers, he listened when I talked. He didn't just take me to fancy dinners, he cooked for me at home. He didn't just tell me I was beautiful, he made me feel it every single day. But the best part was watching Antonio's reaction when he found out about us. Julian and I went public with our relationship at a big legal conference that both their firms attended. We walked in together, my arm linked through his, both of us looking amazing, and clearly very much in love. The look on Antonio's face when he saw us was priceless. His jaw literally dropped, and he spent the whole evening staring at us from across the room. Later that night, Antonio cornered me in the hotel lobby. "Candace, what are you doing?" he asked, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. "I'm living my life," I told him calmly. "You know, the one you walked away from. But with him, you know how I feel about him. You know he's my biggest competitor." I looked at this man who had humiliated me at my own wedding and had the audacity to question my choices, and I smiled the sweetest smile I could manage. "Antonio," I said, "you gave up the right to care about who I'm with when you chose another woman over me at our wedding. Julian treats me better in 1 day than you did in 3 years. He's a better man than you'll ever be, and honestly, he's better at everything than you are." The last part wasn't just me being petty, though I was definitely being petty. It was also true. Over the next year, Julian's law firm started winning cases and clients that had previously gone to Antonio's firm. Julian was smarter, more prepared, and had better relationships with his clients. Antonio's career started going downhill fast, while Julian's skyrocketed. Meanwhile, my relationship with Julian was everything my relationship with Antonio never was. We supported each other's careers, we communicated honestly, and we built something real together based on mutual respect and genuine love. Julian proposed to me on the 1-year anniversary of our first date, and when he got down on one knee, there was no doubt in my mind what my answer would be. Our wedding was beautiful, intimate, and drama-free. Just our closest family and friends, a ceremony filled with real love and joy, and a reception where everyone celebrated us genuinely. It was everything my first wedding attempt wasn't: authentic, peaceful, and absolutely perfect. But the story doesn't end there, because Antonio couldn't leave well enough alone. About 6 months after Julian and I got married, Antonio started showing up everywhere I went. Coffee shops where I worked, networking events, even at the grocery store. He would try to get me alone to talk, telling me he'd made the biggest mistake of his life and that he wanted me back. "Brittany and I didn't work out," he told me one day when he cornered me outside my office. "I realized she wasn't the woman I thought she was. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away." I looked at this man who had once been my whole world, who had crushed my heart in front of 300 people, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing, just nothing. "Antonio," I said, "I need you to understand something. When you walked away from me at that altar, you didn't just end our relationship. You showed me who you really are. You're a man who runs toward what he thinks he wants without any thought for who he hurts along the way. You're a man who makes decisions based on feelings instead of commitment. And you're a man who only realizes what he had when he sees someone else appreciating it. He tried to interrupt me, but I held up my hand. Julian doesn't just love me when it's convenient or when there's no other option. He chose me every single day for who I am, not because I was available when his first choice wasn't. You had 3 years to prove you were the man I deserved, and you failed. Julian proved it in 3 months. Antonio looked defeated, but he still didn't give up. He kept trying to reach out, sending flowers, leaving messages, even going so far as to contact my family to try to get them to convince me to talk to him. But here's the thing, my life with Julian was so good, so fulfilling, so right, that Antonio's desperate attempts to win me back just seemed pathetic. Julian and I had built a beautiful life together. We bought a house, combined our businesses to create a powerhouse partnership, and we're planning to start a family. I was happier than I'd ever been, more successful than I'd ever dreamed, and more loved than I ever thought possible. Meanwhile, Antonio's life fell apart completely. His law firm lost so many clients to Julian's firm that they had to downsize. Brittany left him after 6 months when she realized he wasn't as successful as she thought he'd be. He had to sell his fancy condo and move back in with his parents. Last I heard, he was working for a small firm in the suburbs, making a fraction of what he used to make. The final confrontation happened at a mutual friend's birthday party that both Julian and I attended. Antonio was there too, looking like a shadow of his former self. He approached us while we were talking to some friends, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "You two think you're so perfect," he said loudly, drawing everyone's attention. "But Julian, you only wanted her to get back at me. And Candace, you only married him for revenge." Julian stepped forward, but I put my hand on his arm and stepped up to Antonio myself. "You're absolutely right about one thing," I said calmly. "Marrying Julian was the best revenge I could have gotten against you, because every single day he shows me what real love looks like. Every single day he proves that I deserved better than what you gave me. Every single day, he makes me grateful that you were too much of a fool to appreciate what you had." I paused and looked him straight in the eyes. "But here's what you don't understand. Julian didn't marry me to get back at you. He married me because he loves me. And I didn't marry him just for revenge. I married him because he's everything you never were and everything I always deserved. You're not even a factor in our happiness anymore. You're just a reminder of how much better my life got after you left it." Antonio stood there looking like he'd been slapped, and honestly, maybe he needed to be. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it's necessary. Julian and I walked away from that conversation hand in hand, and we haven't seen or heard from Antonio since. Last I heard through mutual friends, he moved to another state to start over. I hope he finds peace and learns how to be a better man for whoever comes next in his life. As for me, honey, I'm living my best life. Julian and I just celebrated our 2nd wedding anniversary. We're expecting our first baby, and both our careers are thriving beyond our wildest dreams. Sometimes at night, when I'm lying in bed next to my husband, who loves me unconditionally, I think about that day at the altar when I thought my world was ending. It wasn't my world ending. It was my real life beginning. If this story taught you anything, drop a comment about a time you turned your pain into power. Like this video if you believe in karma, and subscribe for more real talk about love, betrayal, and coming out stronger. Remember, queens, sometimes the best revenge is just living your best life. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. And never be afraid to walk away from what doesn't serve you to find what does. Sometimes, what feels like the worst day of your life is actually the day your real life begins. I'll see you in the next one.